It rises 8,848 meters above sea level. Locals call it Sagarmatha, forehead of the sky, in Nepali, or Chomolungma, mother of the world, in Tibetan. We know it as Everest, the highest peak on the planet, which draws climbers from all over the globe. But the path to the summit is not only a test of physical strength, it is also a battle with death itself. Its slopes are covered with eternal snow and glaciers that slide into deep valleys, forming chaotic labyrinths of crevasses and ice walls. Winds here can reach speeds of over 160 kilometers per hour. Temperatures drop to minus 30 degrees Celsius even in the warm season, and the oxygen level in the air is twice as low as at sea level. This is where the so-called death zone begins. Altitudes at which the human body slowly dies. The mountain stands on the border of two countries, Nepal and China, Tibet. And this geography has defined the two main routes to the summit, the southern route from Nepal and the northern route from Tibet. But before it became a tourist dream, Everest remained unconquered for decades. As early as the 1920s, British expeditions tried to reach the summit from the north, but severe weather and unpredictable avalanches stopped every attempt. And only on May 29, 1953, New Zealander Edmund Hillary and Sherpa Tenzing Norgay first set foot on the highest point on Earth, opening a new era in the history of mountaineering. The south route of Everest consists of several key camps, and each one is not just a stop, but a whole stage in the struggle against altitude. Base Camp, 5,364 meters. This is the starting point, where climbers spend 2 to 3 weeks. Here, the body begins to adapt to reduced oxygen levels. The air contains only about 50% of the oxygen available at sea level. Acclimatization follows the principle of climb high, sleep low. During the day, teams make trips higher up the route and then return here to sleep. The atmosphere at base camp resembles a small tent city with kitchens, medical points, and expedition headquarters. There are even improvised cafes and internet access, but the cold, wind, and sharp temperature drops are a constant reminder that this is only the beginning. Camp Idao, 6,065 meters. To reach this camp, climbers must cross the Khumbu Icefall, the most dangerous section of the route, where ice towers can collapse at any moment. Climbers usually stay here for one night to allow their bodies to adjust to the new altitude. The air is already thin, and even sleep can be restless. During the day, temperatures under the sun can rise to plus 20 degrees Celsius, but at night they drop to minus 15 degrees Celsius. Camp 2, 6,400 meters. Located in the heart of the Western CWM, this camp is often called the Advanced Base Camp. Teams spend several nights here and make climbs to the Lhotse face for further acclimatization. Meals are cooked on gas stoves, and water comes only from melted ice. At this altitude, symptoms of altitude sickness often appear: headaches, loss of appetite, and insomnia. These are signs that the brain and body are receiving less oxygen. If symptoms worsen, a climber must descend immediately, or they risk developing life-threatening cerebral or pulmonary edema. Camp 3, Tsatani B, 7,200 meters. This camp sits directly on the steep slope of the Lhotse face. Here, the air contains only about 40% of the oxygen at sea level. Even the simplest actions, zipping up a jacket or taking a sip of water, require enormous effort. Sleeping at this altitude is a real ordeal. The heart races even at rest, and sleep comes only in short, shallow bursts. More serious symptoms of altitude sickness often appear here, and Sherpas closely monitor climbers' conditions. Camp 4, 7,920 meters, South Col. This is the final staging point before the summit push. Climbers spend only a few hours here, resting and waiting for nightfall to begin the final ascent. The air contains less than 1/3 of normal oxygen, and even with bottled oxygen, breathing is extremely difficult. The body begins to break down. Muscles weaken, thinking slows, and reaction times drop. From this height begins the so-called death zone, a place where the body can no longer recover, and every hour spent here reduces the chances of survival. Acclimatization on the south route usually takes over a month. Teams climb up to certain camps multiple times and then descend back to base camp to let their bodies adapt. Only after that do they wait for the weather window to attempt the final summit push. From Camp 4, climbers set out around 10 p.m. or midnight. The timing is calculated so that they can reach high on the route by sunrise and descend back to the South Col before nightfall. The first hours of the climb are a relentless battle against wind and cold. Temperatures can drop below -30 degrees Celsius, and with wind chill, it feels closer to -50 degrees Celsius. After several hours of slow movement along a narrow trail lit only by headlamps, climbers reach the first key point, the balcony at about 8,400 meters. This small ledge offers the first breathtaking panorama of the Himalayas. Here, climbers make a short stop to switch oxygen bottles and check their gear, but they cannot linger. The cold penetrates even the thickest gloves, and time in the death zone slips away mercilessly. From the balcony, the path follows a narrow ridge. The route continues over steep ice and rock sections, where climbers must use fixed ropes to ascend. At this altitude, every step requires enormous effort. The heart pounds as if sprinting, even though the pace is just a few steps per minute. The next landmark is the South Summit, at about 8,750 meters. Many climbers mistake it for the true summit, but the real peak still lies ahead. From here, the route reveals the main ridge and the infamous Hillary Step, a nearly vertical 12-meter rock wall named after Sir Edmund Hillary. Before the 2015 earthquake, it was a narrow, challenging bottleneck where long queues often formed. After part of it collapsed, the climb became technically easier, but it still demands complete focus. Once past the Hillary Step, only about half an hour remains to the goal. Yet these final meters are the most exhausting. Oxygen is critically scarce, legs feel like lead, and the mind slows to a crawl. Suddenly, a small snowy dome adorned with prayer flags appears before their eyes. The summit of Everest, standing at 8,848.86 meters above sea level. Climbers usually spend no more than 10 to 15 minutes on the summit. The cold is piercing, and every second in the death zone carries risk. A quick photo, a few words over the radio, one last look at the endless horizon, and the descent begins. Descending from the summit is often even more dangerous than the climb. Exhausted, dehydrated, and disoriented by hypoxia, many climbers lose focus and strength. Most deaths on Everest occur during the descent, from falls along the ridges, frostbite, or cardiac arrest due to exhaustion. The most terrifying moment is when strength runs out before reaching Camp 4, leaving a climber to spend the night in the death zone, with little hope of survival. Now we move to the second classic route, the northern route from Tibet, starting on the Chinese side. It is considered more technically demanding and windier, but with fewer avalanche zones than the southern route. The climb begins at the North Base Camp, 5,150 meters. Even here on the harsh Tibetan plateau, the thin air is felt immediately. But true acclimatization starts higher up. The road to the summit passes through a series of high camps perched on steep cliffs and narrow ridges. The first key section is Camp Wanburs, North Col, 7,000 meters. To reach it, climbers must scale the steep Rongbuk Glacier. The winds here are so strong that tents often have to be anchored into the ice with metal stakes. Next comes Camp 2, 7,500 meters, situated right on a rocky ridge. Acclimatization becomes harder here, Nights are freezing, and during the day the ice reflects the blinding sun. Many begin to experience symptoms of altitude sickness, headaches, nausea, and insomnia. Camp 3, 8,300 meters, is the final stop before the summit push. It's often called the Camp of Death because it lies deep within the death zone, where even at rest, the human body is slowly shutting down. Climbers stay here for only one night, sometimes just a few hours, before starting the final ascent. The summit push begins late at night. The first major obstacles are the 3 rock steps, 3 steep rock faces above 8,500 meters. The first step requires a short but technically demanding climb up vertical slabs. The second step is the most famous and the most feared. A metal ladder installed by a Chinese expedition in 1975 is fixed here. Winds, ice, and altitude make this section extremely dangerous. It was near this point in 1924 that George Mallory and Andrew Irvine disappeared during their summit attempt. To this day, no one knows whether they reached the top. The third step is technically easier, but after 8 hours of exhausting climbing, it feels like a wall. After the steps, climbers reach a narrow, snowy ridge leading to the summit. In strong winds, this section becomes deadly. One misstep could send someone plunging 3 kilometers down. From the northern side, Sensoastin, Nordins, the summit looks less romantic. A small snow triangle that can only hold a few people at a time. But the real danger begins on the descent. The northern route is particularly treacherous because, after the 3 steps, climbers' legs are weak and their reflexes slow. Many fatal falls occur here. The bodies of some climbers remain on the route as grim markers, like the infamous green boots, lying near the second step since 1996. If the weather turns, descending from the north becomes a fight for survival. There's no quick route to lower, safer altitudes, and many fail to make it even back to Camp 3. Many people think that reaching the summit is the hardest part. But the real battle begins the moment a climber turns back. Statistics show that over 70% of deaths on Everest happen during the descent. Not just from exhaustion, but because the summit is only half the journey. After reaching the world's highest point, most climbers have little energy left. Their bodies are starved of oxygen, even with tanks. Many summit at night, and by the time they descend, the sun is blazing. Snow becomes soft and unstable, increasing the risk of falls and avalanches. The most dangerous points are the same as during the ascent, but now they're harder to cross. On the southern route, these include the balcony, Hillary Step, and the narrow rock ridges near the top. Climbers often stop there, completely drained. But every minute in the death zone, above 8,000 meters, drains life. When oxygen runs out, the brain begins to shut down. Confusion, hallucinations, and loss of decision-making follow. Many simply sit down on the trail and never get up again. On the northern route, the descent through the 3 steps is deadly. Even skilled climbers must use the metal ladder on the second step, but in exhaustion, it becomes a fight for survival. Many have died there, even those who had already reached the summit. Another cause of tragedy is traffic jams. In good weather, dozens of climbers attempt the summit at once. On the way up, it's bearable, but on the way down, every minute of waiting can be fatal. The infamous photos of long queues at the Hillary Step in 2019 went viral. Several people died that day from exhaustion while waiting their turn. Equally dangerous is the Khumbu Icefall on the southern route. After a grueling summit day, climbers must pass through it again. A maze of massive ice towers that can collapse at any moment. Many who survived the summit have perished here on the way back. And perhaps the harshest truth, on the descent, no one can really help. Everyone is fighting for their own survival. Even Sherpas and guides know. If someone is completely spent above 8,000 meters, rescuing them is almost impossible. That's why Everest remains scattered with the bodies of those who never made it down. Everest has always been not only a symbol of triumph, but also a place of immense tragedy. On both the southern and northern routes, hundreds have died, and many of their stories have become legends. One of the most famous tragedies occurred in 1924. George Mallory and Andrew Irvine set out for the summit from the north side. They were last seen alive climbing toward the second step, just a few hundred meters below the top. Whether they ever reached it remains a mystery. Mallory's body was discovered in 1999 at over 8,000 meters. Irvine's has never been found. Another tragedy struck in 1996, remembered as Everest's deadliest season. A sudden storm claimed the lives of 8 climbers, both professionals and clients who had paid tens of thousands of dollars to join guided expeditions. The disaster revealed that even the most experienced teams are powerless against nature. These events were later immortalized by John Krakauer in his book Into Thin Air. In 2014, a massive avalanche struck the Khumbu Icefall, killing 16 Sherpas who were fixing ropes and ladders for clients. It was a grim reminder that Sherpas often take the greatest risks, paving the way for others. An even greater tragedy came in 2015, when a powerful earthquake in Nepal triggered an avalanche that swept through the South Base camp. More than 20 people were killed and dozens injured, the deadliest single event in Everest's history. But even those who die quietly have stories. The climber known as Green Boots, who perished on the North Route in 1996, became a grim landmark near the second step, his body resting in a small cave for decades. There are dozens of such eternal sentinels on the mountain. Recovery at that altitude is nearly impossible. Another haunting story is that of Frances Arsentieff, who in 1998 became the first American woman to attempt Everest without supplemental oxygen. She reached the summit, but died on the descent, overcome by exhaustion. Her body remained on the route for years until it was finally brought down. These tragedies remind us that Everest is not just the summit of dreams. It's a place where nature never forgives even the smallest mistake.